The film opens with a haunting childhood memory. Young Irene plays a rhyming game with her father in a field, but the joyful moment turns tragic when he suddenly disappears. This trauma marks her deeply and leaves unanswered questions that shape her life. 10 years later, Irene is a teenager grappling with anger, loss, and alienation. She's a competitive swimmer, driven and intense, but during an important race she loses by a fraction of a second and lashes out violently at her rival. The incident results in her disqualification and suspension from competition, further isolating her. At home, tensions flare with her family. She feels like an outsider, especially next to her half-sister and mother, who have seemingly built a new, more stable life. Resentful and disconnected, Irene drops out of school and after a heated confrontation agrees to find a job. Irene moves in with her aunt in a new town, hoping to reset her life. Her aunt suggests she try yoga or meet a therapist, but Irene resists, instead seeking something more tangible: work. She lands a probationary position at a local aluminum factory where she meets Milana, a tough but kind woman who mentors her. At the factory, Irene begins learning the physical demands of industrial labor and starts forming relationships with co-workers, including the aloof but perceptive Salvo. Outside of work, Irene is still impulsive and reckless. At a party, she meets Michele, a charming older man involved in risky behavior like dangerous rooftop jumps. Their connection is flirtatious but complex. Unbeknownst to Irene, Michele has a hidden tie to her past. He was involved in her father's disappearance years ago. This connection slowly unravels as Irene's growing presence in his world threatens to expose secrets he's tried to bury. As Irene adjusts to factory life, she slowly finds a fragile sense of belonging. Her performance earns her cautious praise, but her young age and fiery temper make her a target for judgment. The factory's manager, discovering her past and sensing instability, pressures Milana to fire her. Milana defends Irene, asking for time to prove herself. Irene's bond with Michele intensifies, though it remains volatile. One evening, Michele shares pieces of his past, including stories of recklessness, failed love, and regret. There's a tension and unspoken recognition between them, as if they share a history neither fully understands yet. Meanwhile, flashbacks and subtle clues reveal Michele's role in her father's fate. Eventually, the truth begins to surface. Irene confronts the shadows of her past, piecing together her father's disappearance and Michele's involvement. Their connection becomes a mirror. He is the man on the road she has been running toward and away from all her life. In him, she sees both a possible answer and a reflection of her own chaos and potential for change. The climax revolves around choice and forgiveness. Irene must decide whether to seek revenge or confront the truth and let go. Michele, haunted by guilt, is forced to reckon with his past and what Irene has become, a young woman shaped by pain but no longer defined by it. In the end, Irene doesn't find perfect closure, but she finds direction. She claims responsibility for her future, choosing growth over destruction. The film closes on a hopeful note, with Irene continuing to work, gradually building a new life, no longer the lost girl searching for her father, but a young woman forging her own identity. The Man on the Road is a poignant coming-of-age story about trauma, rage, and redemption. It explores how buried pain and fleeting encounters can shape a person's path, and how even on the roughest roads healing is possible. The Man on the Road is a haunting coming-of-age drama centered around Irene, a rebellious young woman trying to rebuild her life while haunted by the memory of her father's tragic death. As the story unfolds, she is forced to confront the past, forge her identity, and make peace with long-buried trauma. The film begins with a childhood flashback where Irene, then a little girl, plays word games with her father during a peaceful outing. But the joy abruptly ends when he suddenly disappears, a moment that leaves an emotional scar on her for life. The tragedy, her father being killed in a hit-and-run accident, becomes a foundational trauma that defines her journey. 10 years later, Irene is a troubled teenager. She's a competitive swimmer, but her emotional volatility sabotages her potential. After losing a crucial race by mere hundredths of a second, she assaults her opponent and is disqualified. With her career and personal life in freefall, Irene rebels further, fighting with her family and skipping school. Her mother urges her to come home and move on, but Irene refuses, feeling like an outcast in her own family. Irene moves in with her aunt and takes a factory job. Her supervisor, Milana, takes a liking to her and helps her learn the ropes. Despite the noise and hard labor, the work gives Irene a sense of rhythm and control. However, her personal life remains unstable. She begins a secret flirtatious relationship with Loris, a cocky co-worker who is already married. When Loris's wife confronts Irene and humiliates her at the factory, it sparks a violent altercation. Though she's nearly fired, Milana helps her avoid expulsion. Outside of work, Irene develops a complex relationship with Michele, an enigmatic man connected to her past in ways she doesn't yet realize. Michele appears sophisticated, confident, and wealthy. He takes her out, shows her his business projects, and reveals dreams of opening a restaurant. Their chemistry grows, but there's tension beneath the surface. Unknown to Irene, Michele was the driver responsible for her father's death years earlier. Neither of them initially realizes their shared past, but Irene is gradually drawn to him, sensing something familiar yet off. As Irene navigates factory life, failed relationships, and her own identity, she also returns to swimming quietly and for herself. Meanwhile, she continues sketching faces, trying to recover the image of the man who killed her father. She has only a fragmented memory, but she clings to the hope that art can help her remember. These sketches are her private obsessive quest for justice. Eventually, the emotional core of the film emerges when Irene confesses to Michele her deepest pain, the memory of the day her father was killed and her inability to recall the face of the man responsible. Unbeknownst to her, she is speaking directly to that man. Michele, visibly shaken, remains silent, burdened by guilt yet unable to admit the truth. The film ends in emotional ambiguity. Irene doesn't discover Michele's secret, but she gains clarity about herself. She begins to understand that she doesn't need competition, approval, or revenge to define her. Her story becomes one of resilience, of a young woman reconciling with a traumatic past, confronting betrayal, and slowly building a future on her own terms. The Man on the Road is a powerful introspective exploration of grief, guilt, and identity. Through Irene's journey, it portrays how trauma can isolate and distort, but also how through work, connection, and self-discovery, healing becomes possible even without all the answers. A tense, emotionally rich Italian drama about guilt, grief, and redemption, told through the story of Irene Trevigliano, a troubled young woman still haunted by the unsolved death of her father in a hit-and-run accident 10 years earlier. As a teenager, Irene's life has unraveled. Once a promising swimmer, she is now angry, isolated, and disqualified from competition after lashing out at a rival. She lives with her aunt and takes a factory job, struggling to find purpose while secretly fixated on the unsolved case of her father's death. Her obsessive drawings of faces are attempts to reconstruct the man she saw only for a moment the day her father was killed. Irene meets Michele, the seemingly composed heir to the factory's ownership, who inherited the role after the death of his father. To everyone else, Michele is cold and reclusive. But he sees something in Irene and begins spending more time with her, showing her a side of himself no one else sees. Irene, unaware of their past connection, begins to let her guard down. Their flirtation grows into a complicated relationship, but neither fully confronts what ties them together. Michele is the man who ran over Irene's father and fled the scene 10 years ago. As the bond deepens, Irene continues to search for closure about her father's death. She even confronts an old police investigator who tells her the statute of limitations is about to expire. Meanwhile, others in Michele's life, his wife, his employees, sense that something is unraveling. Michele's guilty conscience begins to crack under the weight of Irene's presence, while Irene remains oblivious to the truth. Their relationship spirals after Irene fakes a pregnancy to test Michele's feelings, exposing the dysfunction and emotional dishonesty between them. The lie fractures whatever trust remained. In a desperate moment, Michele drives recklessly with Irene in the passenger seat, as if compelled to recreate the original accident. Irene, terrified, demands he stop. When they crash, the truth finally begins to emerge. Michele breaks down, overwhelmed by guilt, and confesses to Irene that he is the one responsible for her father's death. Devastated and enraged, Irene runs from him. But ultimately, it's Michele who makes the first true act of atonement. He turns himself into the police. This act, though too late for justice, finally brings Irene a measure of closure. The film then jumps forward 5 years. Irene has rebuilt her life. She's returned to swimming, but now as a coach. She works with young girls, offering them the structure and discipline that once saved her. She lives a more peaceful life, even playfully turning down a date to help a student prepare for her anatomy exam. A restaurant Michele had once dreamed of building, the door to the water, has finally opened, implied to be part of Irene's future and a nod to her own emotional rebirth. In the final scenes, Irene is surrounded by community and family. She's reconnected with her mother and taken on a mentoring role, symbolizing that she's no longer trapped by the past. The man on the road who once shattered her world is gone, but her path forward, though shaped by pain, is now her own. The Man on the Road is a moving exploration of trauma, guilt, and the complexity of forgiveness. It shows how deeply one moment can echo through time, and how healing, while never simple, is possible through truth, accountability, and the strength to begin again. If you enjoy watching this video, then subscribe to Angel Recaps for the latest movies explanation.